Good day, students. Welcome to part one of our ACT Math Preparation tutorial series to help you do well on the upcoming ACT exam. To gain access to a copy of this document, simply go to the actstudent.org website to access and download this document. All right, let's take a look at problem number one. It reads, the blood types of 150 people were determined for a study as shown in the figure below. So we have the figure right here for 4 different kinds of blood types. Question: if one person from this study is randomly selected, what is the probability that this person has either type A or type AB blood? Just a real quick tip for probabilities involving or and and. When you see the word or in a probability problem like this, remember the operation is adding. You're going to be adding the individual probabilities. All right. When you see the word and, that indicates multiplication of probabilities. So or is add, and is multiply. Okay. Now, before we get started with the problem solving process of this question, let's take a look at some formulas. 2 formulas you want to keep in mind. The first formula is the probability formula. Okay, so the probability of an event occurring is the number of desired outcomes, what you want. Okay, number of desired outcomes divided by number of possible outcomes. Number of possible outcomes. So this is the formula for calculating probability. Okay, let's go ahead and divide that. All right. Another formula that you have to keep in mind has to do with this tip I indicated here earlier. If you are looking for the probability of A or B occurring, you simply compute the probability of A plus, remember, or is addition plus the probability of B. That's what we're going to be using in this problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up the problem. Let's start by calculating the number of possible outcomes. How many people are there in this situation? Okay, so total number of people. How many people are there? It's indicated here 150. If you weren't paying attention to that and you decided to add the numbers, it'll take you more time, but you still end up with the same result. 62 plus 67 plus 15 plus 6, you end up with 150. Okay, these are the total number of possible outcomes. Now, how many let's go ahead and calculate the probability. Okay, so probability that a randomly selected person out of 150 has a blood type A. What is that probability? The desired outcomes are the total number of people that have type A. So number of type A will be our desired outcome. That divided by the total number of people. Okay, so how many people have blood type A? 67 people. All right, 67 divided by the total number of people, 150. This is the probability that a randomly selected person will have blood type A. All right, the next thing we have to find is probability that someone that's randomly selected has blood type AB. All right, probability of blood type AB is the number of people with type AB, that is the desired outcome, divided by the total number of people. Okay, those are the possible outcomes. So total number of people. All right, so how many people have blood type AB? 6 people. Total number of people, 150. Okay, so now what do we do with these two probabilities? As indicated in the formula here, probability of A or AB is simply determined by computing the probability of A plus probability of AB. Alright, so probability of A is 67 over 150, and I add the other probability of AB, 6 over 150. Now when you're adding fractions, the denominators have to be the same, which is the case here. So you add the numerators, 67 plus 6 is 73, divided by 150. Answer is option letter D. Alright, let's take a look at number 2. It reads, the monthly fees for single rooms at 5 colleges are $370, $310, $380, $340, and $310 respectively. What is the mean of these monthly fees? Okay, so mean and average are basically the same thing. Before we compute it, let's write down what the formula is. So what is the formula for mean? The mean can be computed by finding the quotient of the sum of the values of the elements of a set divided by the number of elements, okay, the number of elements in that set, or number of values. Okay, now in this problem, we have the monthly fees for 5 colleges. Those are that's our set. So let's write it down. Monthly fees is given by 370, 310, 380, 340, and 310. Now, what's the average of the monthly fees, or the mean? The mean is simply the sum of the values, 370 plus 310 plus 380 plus 340 plus 310. The sum of the terms divided by the number of the sum of the values or the elements divided by the number of elements or values we have. We have 5 of them. You may use your calculator for the ACT test, so take full advantage of it. When you're entering a problem like this, please make good use of the parentheses, okay? If you do not group the numerator in parentheses in your calculator will simply divide the last term by 5 and your answer will be wrong. Okay, so let me show you how to enter this correctly in your calculator real quick. Also, make sure that you are familiar with the calculator you want to use for the test before you take the test. Get a new battery if at all possible, and play around with the calculator to make sure that you know what you're doing. Okay? Alright, let me clear my home screen here. So, this is what I was instructing you to do earlier. If you're entering an expression like this with multiple terms in the numerator or the denominator, you have to group them together using parentheses, or else you will have a grouping error and an incorrect result consequently. Okay, so 370, 310, 380, 340, 310. Let's check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks about right. Divided by 5. There goes your answer. If you wanted to do it separately, some calculators can group expressions together. You have to do it one line at a time. If you add the numerator, you end up with 1,710 divided by 5. Okay? And then your final result will be 342. That is the mean of the 5 fees from the different colleges. Alright, let's take a look at problem 3. It reads, on a particular road map, half an inch represents 18 miles. About how many miles apart are 2 towns that are 2.5 inches apart on this map? Now, you can do this problem intuitively just by thinking about it. Half an inch is 18, then 2.5 inches is how many miles? Now, you ask yourself, how many 1/2s are there in 2.5? For every one, you have 2 halves, right? So if you have 2, you have 4 halves plus a half. So you have 5 halves in 2.5. Okay, so if 1/2 is 18, 5/2 will simply be 5 times 18, which is 90. Okay, so you can do it that way, but I'm going to show you how to do it using proportions. All right, so this is something you want to know. If you're setting up proportions, you want to make use of the units. Okay, when setting up proportions, you want to ensure that like units are grouped together in the numerator or denominators of your proportion statement. Okay, so let me show you what I am talking about. Let's look at the formula that we're going to use for this problem first. Formula. Now, we're going to be making a proportion statement, a proportion, which is a statement that two ratios are equal. The first ratio, we're going to have two ratios. We have ratio 1. Ratio 1 is going to have a certain number of inches divided by a certain number of miles. Okay, so let's say x inches divided by y miles. That equals ratio 2, where you have another set of measurements. Okay, so let's say z inches divided by t miles. All right, what am I trying to illustrate here? When you're setting up a proportion, you see how I set it up. The numerators have the same unit, inches, and the denominator have the same unit, miles. Okay, you can have inch and miles and inch here. That's inaccurate. So you have to be consistent with your units. So let's go ahead and apply this formula to this situation here. The first ratio is 1/2 inches and 18 miles. So we have our proportion statement here, our proportion. So the first ratio, we have 1/2 inches on the map, or 1/2 an inch is how many miles? Half an inch represents 18 miles on the actual ground. Okay, half inch, 18 miles equals this ratio 1. The second ratio is incomplete. We have to find a missing part. Okay, so for the second ratio, we have 2.5 inches represents how many miles? We do not know. Okay, so we're going to represent our unknown with a variable. Let's call it x miles. Okay, so this is our proportion we're going to solve to get the answer to this problem. So how do we solve a proportion? First thing you want to do is cross multiply. Okay, denominator on the left multiplied by the numerator on the right, denominator on the right multiplied by the numerator on the left. If you cross multiply, forget about the units for a second. You have 1/2 times x is equal to 18 times 2.5. Okay, now let's get x by itself. We know we're looking for distance and our units will be in miles. So we have a resulting algebraic equation from this ratio problem. Okay, now if you want to carry out operations with mixed numbers, you might want to convert it into improper fractions. So complete that, you multiply the denominator with the whole number, 2 times 2, which is 4, and then add it to the numerator, 5/2. Okay, now this equation becomes 1/2 x equals 18 times 5, 90 divided by 2. All right. Now to finish this off, you simply multiply both sides by 2. And what do we have? The 2's divide out. You have x equals, on the right side, 2 divides out 90 miles. So this is how to do it, showing all your steps. Answer is option letter E. All right, let's take a look at question number 4. So 4 says, given f equals cd to the third, f is 450 and d is 10, what is c? Now, one tip I would like to give you concerning parentheses is that whenever you're carrying out substitutions of values into an equation or function, please make use of parentheses. They help prevent you from making mistakes associated with exponentiation or sign errors. Okay, so make ample use of parentheses when substituting. Let me illustrate what I'm saying in the context of this problem. We have the equation f equals cd to the third. We're given the values of f and d. Observe what I'm going to do here. I'll replace f with the parentheses and substitute the value here. 450 equals, c is what we're looking for, we'll leave it alone, and then d is 10 in parentheses raised to the third power. Okay, so this is a good practice to cultivate, especially when you're working with much more complicated substitution processes. Okay, so the goal now is to get c isolated. So let's get rid of the parentheses first. So we have 450 equals 10 to the third is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. Okay, so we have 1,000 c. Now, how do we get c isolated? We simply divide both sides of our equation by the coefficient of c, which is 1,000. All right. That results in 1,000's divided out on the right side, so we can write this as c equals 450 divided by 1,000. You can simply cancel out a 0 from the top and bottom by dividing by 10. So we have 45 divided by 100. Our options are in decimal form. So we can either plug this in a calculator or do it by hand. One thing you want to note is that the entire ACT math section can be completed without a calculator. Okay, so that's an interesting fact to note. So I'm going to convert this to decimal without a calculator, and then you can confirm if you want. So we have a decimal point behind the numerator and the denominator. The goal is I want to convert the denominator to 1. Okay, and then the numerator will have the resulting answer, because anything divided by 1 is the same thing. Okay, so how can I make 100 1? How many times do I have to move the decimal point? Twice, right? 1, 2. That makes 101. Since I moved the decimal point 2 times to the 2 places to the right, to the left, sorry, in the denominator, I'll move the decimal point an equivalent number of times in the numerator also. So you have 1, 2. Decimal point ends up in front of 4. So this becomes 0.45 divided by 1. What is 0.45 divided by 1? 0.45. There goes your final answer. Option letter F is the solution to this problem. Or you can just plug this into your calculator, you end up with the same result. Okay, let's take a look at problem 5, the last in this review installment. It reads, if f of x equals 3x plus 7 quantity raised to the second power, then f of 1 is. So this is a problem that involves evaluating a function at a particular input value. Just something to note is that if you're simplifying an expression using the order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS. Remember that P, the grouping operation, involves you or requires you to simplify the content of the parentheses completely first before dealing with operations outside the parentheses. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about here. We have the function f of x. X is the input of this function. Okay, so if x is the input, what you're going to do is multiply 3 by that input value, add 7, and square your resulting answer. That's the rule of this function. That is what this function does. It triples the input, adds 7, and squares it. Okay? Now, what is f of 1? F of 1 simply means that you are going to replace x's with 1 in this function. So 3 parentheses, remember we talked about this earlier, always using parentheses when you're making substitution. It's a good practice to avoid making mistakes. square. All right, so that is what f of 1 is. Replace all the x's with 1. Now, order of operations, you want to simplify this completely first before you start dealing with the square on the outside. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So 3 times 1 is 3 plus 7 square. Remember, you want to simplify this completely first, okay? So what is 3 plus 7? 3 plus 7 is 10. Now you can square. Okay, 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. Your answer is option letter E. Okay, so there you have it. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. We appreciate it. If you found the contents of this tutorial beneficial to you, do give us a thumbs up. We'll appreciate a positive feedback. If you have any questions, include it in the comments section below, and we'll be glad to assist you as soon as possible. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel for updates to the remainder of this review series. More clips can be found on math.serve.com. Thanks again for watching and have a wonderful day.